I fought to include my stepdaughter in my family's inheritance, but my husband's family made sure my kids wouldn't get a dime, and when my Phil told me what my husband said, I realized our marriage was a lie. I'm a 35-year-old mom of 2 kids, 17-year-old twins, 1 boy and 1 girl, and a stepdaughter, 18, who came into my life when she was 11. Recently, I was at my parents' house going over some estate planning since I'm the executor. As we reviewed their plans, I noticed they'd set things up to split their assets in half. One part would go to me and my 2 siblings, and the other half was divided evenly among their grandkids. To my surprise, my stepdaughter was included in this. I gently mentioned to my parents that while I appreciated their thoughtfulness, I didn't feel it was necessary to include her. She is the only child on both sides of her family and has her own grandparents and uncles who are financially well off, while my kids and my nieces and nephews have more modest resources from our side. Her grandparents even own multiple properties, and her uncles live comfortably in a high cost of living area. By contrast, my parents' estate, while generous, isn't particularly large. Think enough for a new car or similar. I thought that focusing on my parents' 5 grandkids would be fairer overall. When we got home, my husband, who'd overheard the conversation, confronted me. He said I was being in a hole and making his daughter feel like an outsider. I explained my reasons, including that her financial future is well secured on her mom's side, but he accused me of not caring about her future. I even asked if his parents had included my kids in their will, but he refused to answer. For context, 1, I didn't push my parents to make a change, just shared my thoughts. 2, my mum plans to give my stepdaughter a lovely set of family heirloom jewelry that matches her birthstone, which I think is a sweet gesture. She has other sets for the other girls in the family too. 3, my parents have always welcomed her and typically see her 3-5 times a year. 4, my nephews and niece don't have strong relationships with their biological father's families. My niece is a new mum working in a restaurant, and my nephews could really use the financial boost. So, was I out of line here for advocating for my kids and their cousins? Aita? 5, my stepdaughter is set to inherit at least 2 properties in a major city with a high cost of living. I actually found out about this when my husband asked me to help him organize his office, and I saw the paperwork. The documents were certified and dated soon after we got married, and they clearly outlined her inheritance, while my kids weren't included. At the time, I didn't think much of it and didn't ask him about it because it didn't seem like an issue. 6, there's a bit of distance in my relationship with her, and I don't believe it's my fault. The first time I met her mom, she made it very clear that I wasn't a parental figure. I didn't take it personally, as I completely understood her perspective and wanted to respect her boundaries as her daughter's mom. Over time, our chances to bond naturally unwind. Initially, my husband had every other weekend visitation, but as my stepdaughter grew into her teenage years, she became more interested in spending time with friends or on other activities totally normal for her age. Additionally, we were rarely invited to join in on major events. My husband was welcome, but not me or my kids, so we'd celebrate her birthday a week after with our own little gathering. We also didn't spend Thanksgiving or Christmas with her since her mom preferred to keep those days, and I encouraged my husband to join her. I always valued the importance of their father-daughter connection, so he'd spend holidays at her mom's. This also happened for her high school graduation, where we weren't invited as a family, just him. 7, I just want to address the notion that I'm some kind of evil stepmother and that I see her as other. From the beginning, I tried my best to include her however I could when she was with us. I taught her some of my family recipes, took her shopping for clothes she could keep here so she wouldn't have to bring things back and forth, and I attended as many of her school events as I could. She's a wonderful, talented young woman, and I genuinely care for her deeply. But with the limited contact we've had over the years, forming a truly close relationship has been challenging. I've genuinely made every effort to involve my stepdaughter in our family plans, even vacation planning, but her mom has set firm limits. For example, if the vacation didn't fall on a weekend we had scheduled with her, her mom wouldn't allow her to come. This made it so we could only plan short, local weekend trips. But even then, unexpected reasons often came up, like her mom planning surprise trips to another state. I even suggested we do a family cruise instead of a honeymoon to celebrate our new family, but her mom blocked it. Interestingly, my husband is allowed to take her on extended trips, as long as it's just the 2 of them. When it comes to holidays, I've also tried to be flexible. I've postponed holiday events like Christmas morning so that my stepdaughter could be included, though it's caused a bit of friction with my kids. They sometimes feel like they're always adjusting their schedules for her. And one year, when Christmas fell on our weekend, I suggested celebrating on Christmas Eve to accommodate everyone. My kids weren't thrilled, but they eventually agreed. Yet, despite the planning, we didn't spend any time with her after all. Her mom informed us at the last minute that she had planned a Christmas Eve dinner party and needed her daughter's help to prepare. I've honestly tried my best to create family memories together, but with all these limitations, it's been challenging to bridge the gap. I still wish we could have those big family moments, but I've accepted that, at least for now, our time with her might be more limited. When the time for college applications rolled around, I was over the moon when my stepdaughter asked for my help. I thought this would be a great opportunity to bond and support her. But shortly after, I learned that her mom had hired a professional to assist her in getting into her top choice schools, which meant I was no longer needed for the process. I felt a bit sidelined, especially since I was eager to play a part in her important milestones. Despite this setback, I've genuinely tried to build a connection with her during the limited time we have together. I've talked to my husband about how we need more time with her to strengthen our relationship, at least by keeping his regular every other weekend schedule. But he often reminds me that her mom is the primary decision maker regarding her schedule and how she spends her time. He's also shared his fears about undermining her mom, worrying that it might jeopardize the time he currently has with his daughter. I totally understand where he's coming from, and I definitely don't want to be the cause of any rifts between them. However, I can't help but feel that his relationship with her hasn't really changed, so he might not fully grasp the importance of my kids and me being involved in her life. It leaves me feeling stuck. If he doesn't advocate for us, I wonder what I'm supposed to do to help foster a closer bond with her. I just want the best for all of us and hope that, eventually, we can create some meaningful family memories together. Major update. I haven't had the chance to sit down with my husband and discuss everything that's been on my mind. I was waiting until I could talk to my therapist first to get some advice on how to approach the conversation in the best way possible. However, this morning, I received a phone call from my father-in-law, who I truly saw as an angel of a man. It turns out my husband shared our recent argument with his mom, and my mother-in-law reacted strongly. That's how my father-in-law found out about the whole situation. When he called, he asked for my side of the story, and I found myself pouring out my feelings to him. I told him everything I had mentioned in my original post. I expressed that I never intended to alienate my stepdaughter in any way, and that this whole ordeal has turned into a nightmare for me. After a deep breath and a slight pause, my father-in-law reassured me that I did the right thing by being honest about my feelings. He shared that a few years ago, he suffered a series of strokes that prompted him to reevaluate their estate to ensure everything was in order. He's getting up there in age close to 90 and has several underlying health issues. He and my mother-in-law share all of their assets, and she's also his power of attorney in case anything happens. Since they have a family trust, he wanted to include her and his sons in this discussion. During the call, he told me that he suggested including my children in the family trust. His idea was to allocate 10% of the trust's liquid assets to be split between my two kids to give them a good start in life. However, my mother-in-law pushed back really hard, arguing that since my children aren't biologically related to their family, they shouldn't be considered at all. When he asked my husband what he thought about this, my father-in-law said my husband responded that it was best to keep it in the family, but he would consider including us if he and I were still together at the time of his passing. My father-in-law was surprised by that response, especially since we were still basically newlyweds. My mother-in-law's reaction was equally unhappy, reiterating that we weren't blood and that this was strictly a family issue. Given the stress of the situation and his recent health struggles, my father-in-law decided not to push it further. This entire situation has left me feeling even more uncertain about how to approach my husband. It's tough to navigate these family dynamics, and I really hope we can find a way to communicate and come together on this. After our conversation, my father-in-law pulled my husband aside to clarify what he meant and to assure him that my kids would be included in the estate planning. My husband responded by saying he would do what was best for his family, and then the topic was dropped. My father-in-law mentioned that he didn't push the issue any further because he was feeling tired from the discussion. However, given what's been happening and how my mother-in-law and husband have been responding behind closed doors, he felt it was essential to share this with me. He shared that my stepdaughter is going to be more than okay when it comes time for her college expenses. Apparently, my husband has asked to use some of the family funds to pay for her college so she wouldn't need to take out any loans. which my father-in-law agreed to. Curious about my kids, he asked my husband if he would do the same for them, and my husband replied that he would ask when the time came, since my kids weren't yet aware of what was happening regarding college admissions. My father-in-law then asked if my husband and I had discussed this. I told him that our talks about my kids' schooling included the understanding that they would need to take out loans, finish college, and that we would help pay off half of the loans together once they graduated. I made it clear that my husband has never suggested that any college expenses for my kids would be covered by his family trust. My father-in-law felt really apologetic and said he should have pushed the issue further because he loves us so much and feels he didn't do enough. I reassured him that it wasn't his fault and that he shouldn't feel responsible for any of this. I also told him I didn't want him to feel obligated to bring it up with my mother-in-law or my husband because I knew it would only create more stress for him, and I wanted him to prioritize his own peace. He expressed that while he would like to advocate for us, since he and my mother-in-law have a joint estate and she is the power of attorney, he believed it would be more trouble than it's worth. He also mentioned that he is blind and has mobility issues, so he relies on her for a lot of things. Based on what he's heard from his side of the family, he felt that if he updated his will, it would likely be contested, which would create financial burdens for me. He really didn't want to put me in a negative situation. I reassured him once again that it was okay and that we would be fine in life. I emphasized that he wasn't responsible for anything that happened and that my intention was never to be added to the trust. I just wanted to make a point to my husband. He said he understood and agreed with that. As we wrapped up the call, we expressed our love for each other, and he ended by saying he considered me a person of integrity, which is a rare gem. Now that I have this information, I realize that this whole situation has highlighted many things I hadn't considered about my marriage. Writing out everything about how my husband navigated his relationship with his daughter and ex-wife really put things into perspective for me. It makes me feel like we were never a priority for him, and that's a tough pill to swallow. I'm honestly feeling a bit lost about where to go from here. I plan to bring all of this up with my therapist so I can talk it through and figure out what my next steps should be. I want to explore how I feel and what this means for my relationship with my husband. However, I no longer feel like the bad guy for advocating for my biological family, especially since my husband and his side have been so focused on theirs, with my father-in-law being the exception. It's become clear to me that I need to stand up for my kids and ensure that they are not overlooked. It's frustrating to think that my husband might not have seen how important it is to include my children in family discussions and future planning. So, as I navigate this situation, I'm going to lean on my therapist's advice to help me decide the best way to move forward.